At 5:47 on the morning of May 11, 1945, a Japanese saber struck Private First Class John R. McKinney's skull. He should have died. He didn't. 36 minutes later, 40 Japanese soldiers were dead. One American was still standing, and the secret was a 4-second reload that the enemy couldn't understand. Welcome to History of World War II. What would you do with 8 bullets against 100 enemies? McKinney was 24 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, 130 pounds. He had grown up hunting squirrels and turkeys in the pine forests of Screven County, Georgia. His father taught him to shoot moving targets without using sights. His father taught him something else, too, something that would matter more than marksmanship on this May morning. He taught him to reload faster than thought. Now McKinney was 8,000 miles from those Georgia pines. Dinglin Bay, Tayabas Province, Luzon, the Philippines. Company A of the 123rd Infantry Regiment had established a perimeter defense around a coastal outpost. 127 American soldiers in the jungle. McKinney and 2 other men had been manning a light M1919A4 machine gun through the night. They had completed their watch rotation 20 minutes earlier. McKinney was resting on the ground 3 paces from the gun emplacement when the attack began. The temperature was 78 degrees Fahrenheit. A waning moon provided 70% illumination through scattered cloud cover. The jungle canopy filtered the moonlight into patterns of shadow that made movement difficult to detect. The Japanese soldier with the saber had crawled within striking distance during the final hour before dawn. McKinney felt the blade before he saw the man. The impact was glancing. The soldier had aimed for the center of McKinney's skull. McKinney moved in his sleep at the exact moment of the swing. The blade carved a shallow groove across his scalp instead of splitting his head open. Enough to stun, not enough to kill. McKinney's hands moved before his mind registered what was happening. The M1 Garand had been lying across his chest. 9.5 pounds, a Tround N-block clip. Semi-automatic action. He grabbed it, swung it like a club. The wooden stock connected with the Japanese soldier's face. The man dropped. McKinney worked the rifle's action. A second attacker was charging from his left. He fired. The Garand's report cracked through the jungle. That single shot changed everything. It told 100 Japanese soldiers that the Americans were awake. The assault began. One of McKinney's companions at the machine gun had been wounded in the initial attack. The third man grabbed the injured soldier and pulled him back towards safer positions 40 yards behind the emplacement. This left McKinney alone. He saw what was coming before it happened. 10 Japanese infantrymen rushed the machine gun position. They had rehearsed this maneuver. 3 men provided covering fire, while 7 others sprinted the final 15 yards to the gun. They reached it before McKinney could intervene. They grabbed the weapon. They began rotating it 180 degrees. They were going to turn the American machine gun against the American perimeter. If you want to know how McKinney stopped them, keep watching. The emplacement measured approximately 6 feet wide by 4 feet deep, reinforced with sandbags and palm logs. 10 Japanese soldiers were clustered around the machine gun. McKinney jumped in. He shot the first man at a distance of 3 feet. He worked the Garand's action. Shot the second man. The rifle's semi-automatic mechanism allowed rapid successive fire. No bolt to work. No pause between shots. He fired 7 times in less than 8 seconds. 7 Japanese soldiers fell. 3 remained. McKinney had no time to shoot. The Garand in his hands became a club again. He swung the rifle butt into the nearest soldier's head. The man collapsed. McKinney reversed the swing. Struck the second soldier in the throat. The third soldier lunged with a bayonet. McKinney parried with the rifle barrel. Drove the butt into the man's chest. All 3 fell. 10 Japanese soldiers dead in under 2 minutes. The machine gun was now inoperative. The struggle had damaged the feed mechanism. Spent casings and blood covered the emplacement floor. McKinney climbed out and moved back toward the perimeter. But the main assault was just beginning. He could hear them moving through the undergrowth, breaking branches, shouting orders. The attack was concentrated on his section of the line. The Japanese commanders had identified the machine gun as the strongest defensive position. Eliminating it would create a gap in the American defense. McKinney took cover behind a fallen dipterocarp tree 20 yards from the destroyed emplacement. The trunk measured 4 feet in diameter. Solid cover from rifle fire, not from grenades, not from mortar. He checked his rifle. The Garand held 8 rounds in its N-block clip. He had fired 7 during the emplacement fight. 1 round remained chambered. He ejected the partial clip, inserted a fresh one. The clip made a distinctive metallic ping as it seated. McKinney had 7 more clips in the pouches on his belt. 56 rounds total. The Japanese attacking his position numbered somewhere between 80 and 90 men. The mathematics were not favorable. But mathematics didn't account for what McKinney could do with that rifle. Here's what you need to understand. The Japanese infantry carried Arisaka bolt-action rifles. After every shot, a soldier had to manually work the bolt. Pull back, push forward. Chamber a new round. Aim again. This took approximately 2 seconds per shot. The M1 Garand had no bolt to work. Pull the trigger. The rifle fires. The action cycles automatically. Pull again. 8 shots in 8 seconds if your finger was fast enough. McKinney's finger was very fast, but the real advantage wasn't rate of fire. It was reloading. The Arisaka used a 5-round stripper clip. Reloading took approximately 10 seconds for a trained soldier. During those 10 seconds, you were defenseless. The M1 Garand used an H-round N-block clip. The entire clip ejected automatically when empty with that distinctive metallic ping. Inserting a fresh clip took less than 4 seconds. 4 seconds versus 10 seconds. In combat, that difference was eternity. McKinney had practiced this reload thousands of times in Georgia forests. He was about to use it more than 40 times. The next wave of attackers emerged from the jungle at 5:53 a.m. McKinney counted 15 men advancing in a loose skirmish line. They were moving cautiously, using available cover, stopping behind trees to observe before continuing forward. These soldiers were experienced. They had assessed the situation. They knew an American was behind that fallen tree. McKinney waited until the nearest soldier was 40 yards away. Then he fired. The shot hit center mass. The Japanese soldier dropped. McKinney shifted aim to a second soldier 35 yards out. Fired. Another hit. The remaining attackers went to ground. They had located McKinney's position based on his muzzle flash. Japanese grenades began landing around the fallen tree. Type 97 fragmentation models with 4.5-second fuses. McKinney counted 4 explosions in rapid succession. Dirt and wood splinters kicked up around him. None landed close enough to cause injury, but they forced him to keep his head down. While he was suppressed, the Japanese advanced. McKinney rose up. Fired 3 quick shots. 2 hits, 1 miss. Dropped back behind the tree as return fire snapped overhead. Bullets struck the trunk with solid impacts. The dipterocarp wood was dense enough to stop 7.7mm Arisaka rounds at this range. But staying in one position invited mortar fire. McKinney relocated. He crawled north along the fallen tree for 10 yards, then moved back toward the perimeter through a depression in the ground. The depression was shallow, maybe 18 inches deep, but it provided concealment from ground-level observation. He reached a cluster of large rocks that the company had been using as a supply dump. Ammunition crates were stacked behind the rocks. McKinney grabbed 2 bandoliers of .30-06 ammunition and slung them over his shoulders. Each bandolier held 60 rounds in 6-round stripper clips. He now had 176 rounds available. The weight added 8 pounds to his loadout. He would need every round. At 5:58 a.m., Japanese knee mortar shells began impacting the area. Type 89 grenade dischargers with an effective range of 175 yards. The Japanese crews had moved into positions that allowed them to fire over the tree line into the American perimeter. The first shell landed 30 yards from McKinney's position. The second shell landed 25 yards away. They were walking their fire toward him. McKinney sprinted 20 yards east and dove behind a palm tree. The third mortar shell hit where he had been positioned 3 seconds earlier. The pattern from Georgia forests was keeping him alive. Movement draws attention. Stillness provides advantage. But stillness gets you killed when mortars are falling. So McKinney kept moving. How long can one man hold against these odds? More Japanese soldiers were advancing. McKinney spotted movement at the tree line 60 yards out. He counted 8 men. They were spread out, maintaining 10-yard intervals between each soldier. Proper infantry assault doctrine. McKinney aimed at the lead soldier, controlled his breathing. The Garand sights were zeroed for 300 yards, but McKinney had spent years shooting at moving targets in Georgia forests. He understood trajectory compensation instinctively. He led the target slightly, fired. The soldier fell. McKinney worked through the rest of the assault line methodically. Shot, shift, aim. Shot, shift, aim. The Garand's semi-automatic action allowed him to maintain a steady rate of fire without working a bolt. 5 of the 8 Japanese soldiers fell before they reached cover. The remaining 3 withdrew into the jungle. If you're still watching, subscribe now. This fight is far from over. The pattern repeated 6 more times over the next 30 minutes. Japanese soldiers would advance in small groups. McKinney would engage them at range. Some groups withdrew. Others pressed forward. McKinney kept moving between positions, never staying in one spot longer than 2 minutes. He reloaded the ground constantly. Fire 8 rounds. Eject the empty clip. Insert a fresh one in less than 4 seconds. This was faster than the bolt-action rifles the Japanese were using. It gave McKinney a rate of fire advantage that compensated for being outnumbered. And here's what the Japanese couldn't understand. Every time McKinney's rifle went silent, that distinctive ping would echo across the battlefield. That ping told them McKinney was reloading. That ping should have been the signal to charge. 10 seconds of vulnerability, enough time to close 30 yards at a sprint. Except McKinney wasn't vulnerable for 10 seconds. He was vulnerable for 4. By the time Japanese soldiers processed the ping and began their charge, McKinney had already seeded a fresh clip. By the time they covered 15 yards, McKinney was firing again. The Japanese commanders couldn't adapt to this timing. Their entire assault doctrine was built around the reload windows of bolt-action rifles. McKinney's Garand didn't follow those rules. For seconds, that was the trick. That was why 40 Japanese soldiers died. At 6:14 a.m., McKinney was behind a termite mound 30 yards from his original position. The mound stood 5 feet tall, provided excellent cover. 360 degrees of observation. McKinney had expended 6 clips, 48 rounds. He had secured more ammunition from the supply dump, but the bandoliers were now scattered across 3 different positions. If he needed to retreat further, he would lose access to that ammunition. McKinney decided to hold this position. 3 Japanese soldiers appeared at 45 yards. They were moving fast, sprinting through the open ground between the tree line and McKinney's position. Different tactic. Speed instead of stealth. McKinney shot the first man at 40 yards. The second at 35 yards. The third man reached a large rock 15 yards from McKinney's position before McKinney could shoot him. The Japanese soldier had a grenade. He pulled the pin, prepared to throw. McKinney fired. The bullet struck the soldier in the chest. The man fell backwards. The grenade dropped from his hand. It detonated 3 seconds later, killing him instantly and cratering the ground around the rock. Then McKinney heard something. Voices behind him. American voices. Reinforcements were arriving from the company headquarters 200 yards back. A squad of 8 men reached McKinney's position at 6:23 a.m. They had been sent forward when the machine gun position went silent. The squad leader wanted to know if McKinney was injured. McKinney said he was functional. Blood was running down his face from the saber wound. His hands were cut from rifle stock splinters. His uniform was soaked with sweat and dirt and other men's blood. But he was functional. The squad leader deployed his men in a defensive arc around the termite mound and sent a runner back to headquarters. The Japanese assault broke at 6:31 a.m. The attacking force had sustained catastrophic casualties. The survivors withdrew into the jungle toward the Sierra Madre Mountains. The American squad pursued for 100 yards, then returned to secure the perimeter. McKinney remained at the termite mound. He still had 4 clips of ammunition in his pouches, 32 rounds. He reloaded the Garand with a fresh clip and waited for orders. At 7 a.m., with full daylight revealing the battlefield, a patrol counted the bodies. 38 dead Japanese soldiers were found around the destroyed machine gun emplacement. 2 more were found beside a Type 89 knee mortar 45 yards distant from the emplacement. Total confirmed count, 40. The patrol also found evidence that wounded Japanese soldiers had been carried away during the withdrawal. The actual casualty count was likely higher. But only confirmed bodies were recorded in the after-action report. Company A had lost 3 men killed and 7 wounded during the assault. The Japanese had concentrated their attack on McKinney's section of the perimeter. If that section had collapsed, the entire company defense would have been compromised. The company consisted of 127 men at the time of the attack. A Japanese breakthrough would have allowed them to roll up the American positions from the flank. The battalion commander estimated that McKinney's actions had saved between 50 and 70 American lives directly, and prevented the collapse of the entire defensive perimeter, which would have endangered the remaining 190 men in adjacent positions. What does a man do after 36 minutes like that? McKinney was promoted to sergeant and recommended for the Medal of Honor. The citation noted that he had killed 40 enemy soldiers through a combination of rifle fire at ranges from point-blank to 60 yards and hand-to-hand combat using his rifle as a club. The Medal of Honor was presented to Sergeant McKinney by President Harry Truman on January 23, 1946, at the White House. McKinney was 25 years old. The ceremony was brief. Truman asked McKinney what he planned to do after the Army. McKinney said he intended to return to Screven County and resume hunting and fishing. Truman told him that America needed men like him. McKinney thanked the president and returned to Georgia 3 weeks later. McKinney never married. He spent the next 51 years in Screven County, living much as he had before the war. He hunted deer and turkey in the same pine forests where his father had taught him to shoot. He fished the Savannah River and its tributaries. He avoided public appearances and declined most invitations to veterans' reunions and military ceremonies. When reporters occasionally found him and asked about May 11, 1945, McKinney would say only that he did what was necessary, and that he wanted to forget the war. In 1995, veterans from the 33rd Infantry Division organized a 50th anniversary reunion. They had difficulty locating McKinney. He had no telephone. He did not respond to letters. Eventually, a veteran who had served with Company A drove to Screven County and located McKinney through local hunters who knew him. McKinney agreed to attend. He met with the men he had served with 50 years earlier. They asked him about the fight at Dinglan Bay. McKinney said he did not remember all the details. He remembered the saber striking his head. He remembered the machine gun being captured. He remembered shooting and reloading and moving between positions. The rest was fragmented. The veterans told McKinney that he had saved their lives. McKinney said he was glad they had survived. The state of Georgia designated State Route 21 through Screven County as the John R. McKinney Medal of Honor Highway in 1995. McKinney attended the dedication ceremony. He spoke for 3 minutes. He thanked the state for the honor. He said he hoped young people would remember that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite fear. He said the men who died at Dinglin Bay deserved to be remembered more than the men who survived. Then he went home. John R. McKinney died on April 5, 1997, in Screven County, Georgia. He was 76 years old. He was buried with full military honors at Hillcrest Memorial Park. Veterans from the 33rd Infantry Division attended the funeral. The chaplain read from the Medal of Honor citation. The honor guard fired 3 volleys. A bugler played taps, and then they placed something on his casket before it was lowered into the ground. His M1 Garand rifle. The rifle that had fired 40 rounds in 36 minutes on May 11, 1945. The rifle that had clubbed 3 Japanese soldiers to death when ammunition and time ran out. The rifle that a Georgia hunter had used to save 190 men he barely knew in a jungle 8,000 miles from home. The rifle that proved what one soldier with proper training and sufficient will could accomplish against overwhelming odds. McKinney's actions at Dinglin Bay became a case study in small unit tactics at Fort Benning's Infantry School. The lesson taught to generations of infantry officers was simple. When the situation is desperate and help is not coming, a single soldier with a rifle and the will to use it can hold a position against forces 10 times his number. Not through superhuman ability, not through fearlessness, through the application of fundamental skills learned in childhood forests. Shooting squirrels that moved too fast for careful aim. Shooting turkeys that appeared and vanished in seconds. Learning to trust instinct over deliberation. Learning to reload faster than thought. Learning that survival in close quarters required hitting the target before the target hit you. McKinney had brought those skills from Georgia pine forests to Luzon jungles. The principles remained the same. Movement draws attention. Stillness provides advantage. Speed beats precision at close range. Rapid fire suppresses enemy action. Position changes prevent targeting. Aggression disrupts planning. And a 4-second reload beats a 10-second reload every single time. On May 11, 1945, those principles saved 190 American lives. The Japanese assault on Dinglin Bay was repelled. Company A held its position. The 123rd Infantry Regiment maintained its defensive perimeter. The 33rd Infantry Division continued its operations on Luzon. The campaign proceeded as planned. And in the pre-dawn darkness of that May morning, a Georgia hunter with an M1 Garand had stood alone against 100 attackers. He refused to yield ground that 190 men depended on him to hold. He held it. The price was 40 Japanese dead and a shallow scar across his scalp from a saber that should have killed him but failed. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it. Some men become heroes because they seek glory. John McKinney became a hero because he had no other choice. He never wanted fame. He never wanted recognition. He wanted to hunt and fish in Georgia forests and forget what he had done. But the men he saved never forgot. And now you won't either. McKinney's M1 Garand gave him a 6-second advantage over every Japanese soldier he faced. But there was another American weapon in the Pacific that gave soldiers an even bigger advantage. A weapon so devastating that Japanese soldiers had a special name for it. They called it the Broom of Death. That story is coming next. This is History of World War II. See you in the next one.